We live in a world that's under attack. We live in a world where destruction supersedes construction, and where everything from our morals, our values, our work ethic, our self respect, our self esteem is being challenged at every turn. For the first time in history, people are dying from eating too much rather than too little, as 75% of American people are overweight. And we are in a time where more people commit suicide than those killed in war and by criminals combined. And in every age group, more people are on antidepressants than ever before. And that number continues to climb. It's true, we are under attack, but it's not from a foreign enemy. It's from within ourselves and with each other, and under attack from a fast paced world where there is so much noise. And the collateral damage is our mental health, our coping mechanisms, and our ability to ask for help. When this topic came up, I had someone write to me and ask me to share my thoughts. And I knew that discussing this delicate topic of mental health, I'd have to be very careful because this is such a deep subject with so many layers and moving parts. It can also be polarizing. So what I have to say, not everyone's going to agree with, but I hope it does make you think. So let's start with this. For those of us who grew up in the pre-technology era, the pre-cell phone era, you may subscribe to the idea that our kids who have mental health issues, they just need to toughen up and get over it. Well, although there may be some truth to that in certain situations, and that may have worked for us, what we have to realize is that our kids are not growing up in the same world that we did. They are born into a place that's much nastier, much noisier, and much more cluttered than we could ever imagine, like it or not. And what is suffering is their mental health and their ability to cope with all of this noise. In order to fully discuss something as sensitive as this, you need to try and identify why this is happening. And although there are a myriad of reasons and they all can be tied together, there are a few that begs the question, what is different about now than before? Of course, we can't list all the reasons our kids are in trouble because it could be anything from socioeconomic reasons, family issues, awkwardness, shyness. But you know what? Those things, they've been around forever. My question is, what has changed that has made this epidemic more challenging than years before? Well, before I jump into a couple of things that are on my mind, let me preface it all by saying this. Being a kid these days, it's not easy. There's constant pressure to find out what makes you happy, what makes you sad. You're feeling things for the first time, discovering who you are in a world that's constantly challenging your identity. You're being exposed to social media in a world which can be brutal and misleading. You have an unfiltered internet at your fingertips with all the information you could ever desire, yet you know nothing. You have adult content, and that has become your normal. And childhood is lost. And you live in a time where there has never been a greater need for parents, but there's never been a time where parents have been more absent. Now factor in hormones, drama, family problems, bullying, classwork, extracurriculars, and you've got a powder keg of problems that could explode at any time. And sometimes it does. I think we all would agree that the most obvious contributing factor to the decline of our kids' mental health is technology and social media. And according to the Common Sense Census, teens use social media, phones, computers, tablets for entertainment more than 8 hours a day on average. Since the boom of social media, we've seen a dramatic increase in teenage depression, where half of high schoolers even admit that it's because of social media, and they admit that they feel persistently sad or hopeless to the point that they couldn't take part in their normal activities. Yet we allow them to maintain numerous social media accounts and use their own discretion when it comes to the use of technology. And what we tend to forget is this: Technology is a useful servant, but a dangerous master. And once we've succumbed to our new ruler, the damage it's doing to our brains is irreversible and directly affecting our mental well-being. We all know that studies have shown that our devices are directly tied to increased depression, anxiety, and loss of self-worth. And with the constant stream of information, the unrealistic expectations, the bullying, all of it taking place on social media, pretty soon, our kids aren't even comfortable in their own skin. They don't like themselves. And this is something that we didn't have to deal with. And yet, it's every single day for our kids. And COVID didn't do our mental state any favors either. We made social isolation the norm and said farewell to human interaction, face-to-face communication, and in-person education. And the way that we responded to this made us afraid of our own shadows and each other. And while adults were finishing all of Netflix, our kids were glued to their screens in further isolation. And we didn't think that we'd have some consequences from this. Well, we can't begin to help our kids if we don't recognize what they're going through. They already feel alone. And the result is isolationism, one of the main catalysts of negative mental health. We've replaced people with technology. I mean, you go into a grocery store and we have more self-checkout stations than ever before. We don't get to talk to anyone anymore. Yet we give a shy child a device and allow them to further retreat rather than learn basic human interaction. And we wonder why they don't talk to anyone when they're in trouble. Human interaction is the fuel that keeps our souls alive, but we deprive ourselves of it. Another layer to this complex subject is something that is commonly overlooked, yet can be one of the most damaging. And it's something that we may not even know we are doing. Our society has a tendency to dramatize and sensationalize just about everything. And we are doing this with mental illness. We carelessly fling words around like suicide, depression, anxiety. I'm going to commit suicide. I have depression. I have anxiety. And what we don't realize is that we can end up over-normalizing these issues and create a culture with distorted notions of what is and what is not a mental illness. Experiencing depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, OCD, or bipolar disorder, that's not supposed to be normal. But feeling sadness, occasional anxiety, or being overwhelmed is a common part of life. Unfortunately, we've lost coping mechanisms and we've normalized these conditions to the extent that they're often overlooked compared to a common cold and not treated seriously. As a result, those genuinely in need of help may not seek it because their experiences are perceived as unworthy of treatment, because now it's normal to feel this way. Now, I'm certainly not saying that we should forego awareness, nor am I saying we shouldn't have conversations about mental health. Not saying that at all. But what I am saying is we need to be cognizant of what we deem to be normal, because people all over are openly sharing their mental health struggles, encouraging others not to feel ashamed of their own conditions, but to accept them as an integral part of their identity. And I don't agree with that at all. Mental illness doesn't define a person, it's merely a hurdle they confront. Yet we have this obsession of attaching a label to everyone, including ourselves, and that quickly becomes our identity. And we gravitate toward that label as it gives us comfort, because in this constant search for self where loneliness dominates, this self-diagnosis tells us who we are. And that is dangerous. And that's another thing our kids are dealing with that we never did. Something else to consider. A lot of those who need help won't ask because they don't feel like anyone listens to them. And can you blame them? We aren't the best listening society in the world. We're too self-absorbed because most of us, we don't listen to understand. We listen to respond. And thus, we forget that one of the most precious gifts we can give anyone is our full attention. Again, further pushing our kids away, alone. Another ingredient in this is how our kids are trained for instant results to problems, instant solutions, instant gratification. And when it isn't there, sometimes they act like spoiled toddlers because they haven't been taught patience or resiliency. And that directly ties to our mental health. I feel sad, fix it. I feel mad, hit it. And the art of thought and reflection and problem solving are old school ways of the past. They don't know a different world because we haven't taught it to them. Look, I say all of these things just so we know what our kids are dealing with. And it's overwhelming at times. And without a positive network of real connections, strong parents or family, our kids, well, they're going to get their information and their self-worth from anyone or anything that will influence them. And that's a big part of our mental health crisis. So what do we do? What can we possibly do to help our kids' mental health in this messed up and misguided world? Well, the answer for me, go old school and make them play. A new theory suggests that part of the rise in teen mental health crisis is that our kids, they don't play. They aren't outside, engaged in unsupervised play. Ask any adult, and they'll tell you that when they played outside as a kid, they played all day and were told to come home when the street lights came on. Little did we know that we were onto something. Okay, times are different now, and maybe we don't follow those exact instructions, but outdoor play increased our autonomy. It decreased phobias. It reduced future anxiety by increasing confidence that we can deal effectively with emergencies. And even though the data suggests all of this, we still don't make our kids do it. And it makes no sense because exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant there is. Another thing we can do is be present. Be present as parents, friends, coaches, teachers. Be present as people. Unplug, look up, detach, enjoy the silence, decrease the clutter, and have actual conversations about these issues without normalizing them. And give our kids the tools to cope and not just the medication to deal. And lastly, engage in positive self-talk, because the way that you speak to yourself matters the most. Too many times we let our kids get away with, I suck, I'm no good, I can't deal with this. And all it does is reinforce the feelings of inadequacy and loneliness. And it's that feeling of being alone that eventually tips the scales in the wrong direction. I'm a dad of 3 girls, and I've always believed that a girl's first love should always be her daddy. However, if I'm going to make that happen, I have to make sure that they love themselves. So when they were little, I stood with them while they brushed their teeth and got ready for bed. And before I tucked them in, I made them look into the mirror and say something to themselves about something that they liked about themselves. So they went to bed with something positive in their minds. You see, positive self-talk can change a person. But the mind believes, the body will follow. So don't let a day go by where you don't tell yourself or others for that matter how awesome they are, because it matters. And if you put the right stuff in your heart, the right stuff will come out. In closing, the mental health of our children is not anything to take lightly. Our kids are exposed to more junk than any other time in history. Their overstimulated minds are constantly racing, and their self-worth is always in question. Our job is to stop the madness, teach them coping mechanisms and social skills, but most importantly, be present and listen. Our kids need models, not critics. They're like wet cement, and whatever falls on them leaves an impression. So give them smiles and not frustration. Teach them lessons, not embarrassment. Instill resilience, not defeat. And always let them know that they are strong and they matter. And that no matter what, make them know that they will never be alone. And those are Scott's thoughts.